We're live.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. My name is Chris Conway. I'm the College Readiness and Humanities Coordinator for Union County Public Schools, and I'm joined tonight with Erica High from Union County Health.
Hi, how is everybody this morning? Or this afternoon, excuse me.
Again, thank you for joining us as we have this very important conversation about tobacco and vaping and the impact it has on our community and our youth. I hope that you find all the information that comes today to be very helpful and informative and help you guide your family through the very important years that they have in school and beyond. Now, you'll notice in this webinar that you do have a Q&A function or a Q&A chat. Feel free to, throughout this webinar, to ask any questions that you may have that may come up, that may pop in your mind as you are hearing the information that is presented. We will take breaks during this webinar to answer those questions, and depending on the kind of question, somebody in the background who you don't see is monitoring those questions. They may directly answer it for you, or they may publish that question for the general public to see, and then it will be brought up and it'll get discussed so that it can be shared for everyone who is either watching now or could be watching this later, as this webinar is going to be recorded.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And so, like he mentioned, today we are going to be talking about vaping, which has really become the silent epidemic that's going on here in the United States. My name is Erica High, and I am a community engagement specialist at the Union County Department of Human Services, and I function as a community engagement specialist. And I have some certification in Catch My Breath, which is a teen tobacco cessation program that is nationally recognized. And I have a couple of other tobacco prevention credentials as well. I am a certified health education specialist as well. All right, so of course you probably have a ton of questions about vaping, and we really appreciate you tuning in tonight. And throughout the presentation, hopefully we will get to all of your questions. Make sure to use your Q&A box, and we will get to them as they come in. All right, so some terms to familiarize yourself with. One is definitely e-cigarettes. They can also be called vapes, e-hookah, mods, vape pens, vape kits, ends, or electronic nicotine delivery systems. And throughout this presentation, I will be using e-cigarette and vapes interchangeably because they are the exact same thing. They mean the exact same thing. And these products vary in size and shape, and so sometimes it can be hard to recognize what they are. And through this presentation, we'll kind of go through learning how to recognize them. And these products are small devices that turn liquid into an aerosol, and it's inhaled through the lungs, and that aerosol enters the blood system and goes to our brain, taking nicotine and other chemicals with it. Vaping can also be called juuling. That's something that you might have heard your youth using. So it's something that you should definitely be aware of. And by using the word juuling, it's really trying to separate the action of using nicotine and these products from the actual action itself. We also have combustible cigarettes, and these are the products that you normally think about when you hear smoking. This is your cigarettes, your little cigars, your cigarillos, regular cigars, and these products burn the tobacco, and that's how they are inhaled into the lungs. And we also have smokeless tobacco, and these products will be chewed or chew tobacco and snuff, and they don't burn to get the nicotine into the body, but instead they are sniffed or inhaled into the nose or placed into the mouth. And these products also have various flavors that you can get, as do all of these other products that I just talked about. All right, so every year there is something done called the National Youth Tobacco Survey. And in 2019, this was conducted across across the nation, and it helps to provide information about youth tobacco beliefs, attitudes, behaviors, and exposure to some of the tobacco influences that teens might have. And this helps us to determine how many students are vaping or smoking. It helps us to see if teens think that it's harmful, how often they might vape, and how much they are influenced by what they are seeing around them. And this helps us to develop programs and prevention policies that can help us stop this epidemic. So as you can see in the top graph here, cigarette use has continued to drop since the 90s. We have done a lot of prevention to work around that, but if you notice, our e-tobacco use has continually increased. And in 2016, if you can see right here, there was a huge spike in our e-cigarette use. And as of 2019, 27.5% of high school students and 10.5% of middle school students were using e-cigarettes. And according to the American Lung Association, 8,000 students start vaping every single day. And I don't know about you, but this is a very concerning number to me, because that means 8,000 today, 8,000 tomorrow, and 8,000 the next day after. So this is something that we definitely have to be more aware about. And once we total all of that up in 2019, that means that over 5 million youth were currently using e-cigarettes. And this was up from the 2018 report that they took, which said that 3.6 million students were using e-cigarettes. And then in 2019, they also determined that nearly 1 million students were using products daily. We're using these e-cigarette products daily. And 1.6 were using them 20 out of the 30 days of every month. There we go. So 31.2% of everybody that was surveyed were using some sort of tobacco products. And as you can see, e-cigarettes was at 27.5%. And the problem with this is that youth that vape are 4 times more likely to switch over to regular combustible cigarettes, which include the cigars that are 7.6%, the cigarettes at 5.8%, and the smokeless tobacco products at 4.8%. The U.S. Surgeon General, in his Health Consequences of Smoking 50 Years of Progress report, estimated that 5.6 million children alive in 2014 would die prematurely as the result of smoking. Now, what we have to realize is that this estimate took place before that 2016 growth in our e-cigarette numbers. So what this isn't showing is that this number is probably a lot higher now. This is about 8 years old, and we have seen an exponential growth in our e-cigarette use. So this is something that it would be interesting to see how many people now that they estimate, if that number has grown and how much it's grown. And already between 1965 and 2014, over 6.5 million people had died related to smoking-related cancers. So in 2021, they did the National Youth Tobacco Survey. They skipped 2020 because of the pandemic, and they found that over 2 million U.S. youth were currently using e-cigarettes. And we're going to talk about in a minute just how misleading this information can be, because this isn't completely accurate. But they found that 11.3% of high school students and 2.8% of middle school students were currently vaping. And as you can see in this graph here, about 2.2% 2 in every 5 students were using e-cigarettes frequently, which means the 20 out of 30 days of every month. And then about 1 in 4 students were using e-cigarettes daily. And as the slide says, this is concerning because youth are using e-cigarettes at a much greater frequency, and this shows that they're becoming more dependent on these products. And 85% of e-cigarette users are using flavored e-cigarettes. And we'll talk about later on how this kind of all plays into what is attracting our youth to these products. And as I said, these numbers are kind of misleading because the survey was done in a completely different manner than it had been in the past couple of years, and so you can't really compare it. But this opens up the door to the question of how bad is this epidemic? We don't really know at this point because we don't have good, accurate data. And so it's going to be interesting to see as we're able to do it again this year, how much we've actually missed an opportunity to get to our youth and educate them about the dangers of vaping. And a lot of this plays into COVID and students being at home, having access to e-cigarettes and being left as parents were going to work, so they were able to use their vapes throughout the day. And so it's going to be interesting to see if even more people are now reporting that they use these products daily. So North Carolina has their own version of the youth tobacco survey. And again, 2019 was the last time that we were able to get good, accurate data. But in 2019, we found out that 27.3% of high schoolers and 10.4% of middle schoolers in North Carolina were using any kind of tobacco product. Now, that does include regular combustible cigarettes, those little cigars, and the smokeless tobacco products that we'll talk about. And once again, we were seeing some progress, but that 2016 change was when we were really starting to see this shift from combustible tobaccos declining to this huge growth in our e-cigarette use. And if you look to the graph on the left, we started collecting, on the right, we started collecting information about e-cigarettes here in North Carolina around 2011. And since then, we have seen a steady increase. And in 2019, we found out that 20.9% of high school students and 6.1% of middle schoolers were using e-cigarettes. And if you notice, I wanted to point out that our percentage of middle schoolers that were using vapes is actually higher than our percentage of high schoolers that reported using combustible tobacco. And that percent is 5.7. And from 2011 to 2019, we saw a 510% increase in our middle schoolers using these products. And then we saw a 1,129% increase in our high school students. All right.
Now, to add a local viewpoint on this and to kind of echo what Erica said about we're missing some data right here, trying to look at what have we seen a change in Union County Public Schools when it comes to vaping use, and you'll see in another slide when it comes to THC use with vapes. We have some statistics on what has been reported by our schools. Now you'll notice we have pre-COVID and post-COVID here. Pre-COVID goes from the beginning of that last school year until we were sent home in March, and post-COVID is from the beginning of this year until early April. So they're close. They're not quite perfect, but they are close in as far as the number of days. But what you can see is that from that pre-COVID year to the post-COVID year, the number of students being caught in possession of vaping material is significantly increased. The number of students who got caught using and or selling has increased. And we can see, though, what is happening. They are replacing traditional tobacco products with the vapes. Now you can say, what's the difference between the possession and the selling? The possession is that they were just caught with it. The use sell is they were caught using it and or they know that they are the ones that gave it to another student. As we can say here, these numbers show a significant increase from pre-COVID to post-COVID. There's a lot of factors that go into it, but one of them is just simply the availability, the ease at which students can hide these products, and the marketing that goes into it, which Erica is going to talk about later. The other concerning bit about this is that not only is vaping leading to more kids doing regular tobacco products, but also that transition from nicotine vape to THC vape. And as you can see that the number of incidents of THC being involved in vaping has significantly increased as well. While if you take that 28% of total drug alcohol incidents, when you factor in that there's about a month more of school come in, that percent really isn't much different. But that 120% change of involving THC, that is a significant difference right there. And you can see that belief that THC vaping of nicotine transitions to drug use, it does. And so that is the concern that we are seeing in all our schools, and it is why we feel like something like this is very informative for our families, and we need this information to get out about the dangers of how what this can lead to for your children.
All right, so now we're going to start talking about what electronic nicotine device systems are. And this is what we would typically call a vape or an e-cigarette. You might also hear it called an e-hookah. They are all one and the same. And they are products that use e-liquids to deliver nicotine and other chemicals to the brain. And they can vary in shapes and sizes. And so it makes it kind of difficult to monitor them and to know exactly what you're looking at when you see one. And this is why it's important to stay up to date and educate yourself, attend sessions just like this so that you know exactly what to look for. Because what appears today might be completely different tomorrow. And in the picture, there are some examples of what an e-cigarette might look like. And we'll go through some more of these in just a minute. And these products continue to change as they try to bypass regulations and keep youth interested in using their products. All right, so this is kind of the anatomy of an e-cigarette. It starts with the mouthpiece right up here at the very top. And this is the part where you put your mouth on it and you're able to inhale the aerosol or the vapor that the e-cigarette makes. You also have the tank, which is located right here. And this is where you are either going to put the e-liquid in directly, or you're going to put the cartridge or pod in that contains that e-liquid. You also have the atomizer that heats up the e-liquid, and this is what helps turns the liquid into an aerosol. And then you have the battery down here, which is the part that really, of course, powers the e-cigarette and helps make that atomizer hot to turn the liquid into a vapor. And this can either be an actual battery or it can also be a USB port that they can use to recharge their e-cigarettes. All right, so I'm going to give you a second just to kind of look at this picture here. So in this picture, there are 6 different e-cigarettes, different vapes, and I'm going to give you a second to see if you can try to figure out which one's the vape and which one is the everyday item. And like I said, there are 6 different vapes here. All right, so B, C, F, G, I, and J are the vapes. And as you can see, vapes come in very different shapes and sizes, and they look almost identical to some of these other products that we might see. All right, and let's see if you can spot the vape in this picture. I'll give you just a couple of seconds to look at it. And this could be anyone's desk. This could be at your house. This could be a table at a school. This could be pretty much anywhere. I mean, it's pretty much a standard cup with some pins. But once you look into it, there are 4 different vapes in this picture. And some of the products that are included are your puff bar, right down here. And it looks oddly similar, like a USB port. You have your Surin drop right here. You have a vape plume, which is actually a pin-looking e-cigarette. And then you also have the Pen Pal Stealth Vapor. And we will go more into detail about some of those in just a minute. But how did you do? Were you able to spot all of the e-cigarettes that were in this picture? If you didn't, that is perfectly okay, because sometimes what we think is a vape or what a vape should look like is not entirely what it is or what it should look like. And they are constantly changing, and they're purposely made to look like regular household items. So I wanted to highlight some of the brands and types of vapes that you might see. And these are some of the most popular brands that are out there. And the very first one that we have over on the left-hand side is Juul. This is the vape that I think pretty much everyone has heard about. It's been in the news a lot here in the past couple of years. And in 2016, there was really this rise in Juul and its popularity. And it's when we started seeing this youth epidemic really taking off. And they were made to be sleek, and they really focused in on the different flavors that you could add into the vape. And then we also have the Surin Vagan, the drop. We have, and this product here, it was specifically designed to fit into your hand. It curves into your hand, and so it's very easy to hide. And it was marketed as a conversation starter. So that kind of plays into, you know, that popularity. Oh, what do you have? Well, it's a vape. We also have Puff Bar, which is currently the most popular brand. And it has replaced Juul in the past couple of years. And then there are also products like the C-Cell Dart. So over the years, there has been kind of this evolution of vapes. They have changed their design, their style, what kind of products they use. And so we're going to go through all of these and talk about their features and the new technology that they kind of marketed. So in the very first generation, they were similar to your conventional standard e-cigarette. And so that led to them being called cigalikes. And this product was used until the e-liquid was gone, and then you could just toss it away. And so there were only 3 ingredients that were listed in this type of vape, and that was propylene glycol, nicotine, and water. And so this kind of plays into their idea of being a safer type of cigarette or tobacco product. In the second generation that came along, you had vapes that looked more like pens, and they used what is called a tank system. And what that means is that you were able to refill the tank with the e-liquid. Not only were you able to refill it, but it held more e-liquid at one time. And this was the first time that you saw flavors really being introduced into e-liquid and into vapes. And they came with a rechargeable battery, so you were saving money on not throwing away the full device, but only having to go back and buy the cartridges. In the third generation, products started to become larger, and their tanks and batteries were bigger, and so they were able to hold more e-liquid than any product that had previously been made. And you were able to modify bits and pieces of the vape, and so they came out with the really cool name mods. That's what they were called at the time. And this allowed youth to be able to personalize their e-cigarette, which kind of plays into that whole idea of, you know, individuality and kind of making a stance and being your own person because you were able to be different than, say, your friend. And this really appealed to that age group of being able to personalize it. And they are identifiable by their big, boxy tanks. The fourth generation was when we saw the introduction of the pod system. And this was a complete game changer for vapes. You were able to have a pod that was filled with e-liquid, and all you had to do was snap it to a small battery. And this allowed e-cigarettes to be designed this way to have a low wattage but a much higher nicotine strength within it. And this was, quote, ideal for people that were just starting out vaping. These products were disposable. And as I mentioned, in 2016, we saw the rise of Juul take place, which ultimately led to this huge increase in youth using e-cigarettes. And as I was doing some research, I, came across Juul's website, and it described these products as compact and small enough to hold between 2 fingers. So I thought that that was just an interesting way that they were trying to market its small size. And currently we are actually in kind of the 5th rebranding or generation of vapes. And this has since came out since a tobacco ban was put into place that tried to limit the number of flavored products that we had out on the market. And we'll kind of go more into a little bit of detail about the flavor ban later on, but kind of keep in mind that 85% of people that were surveyed in the National Youth Tobacco Survey that said that they used flavored product, because obviously this was very appealing to people. And this is when we saw the introduction of Puff Bar really take off. And this generation is disposable and advertised as ready whenever you are. And they used a new product called Nicotine Salts, or synthetic nicotine, that allows for a higher concentration of nicotine and a much smaller amount of e-liquid. And companies continue to go back kind of to the same method. If you notice, they kind of switch between how they introduce the e-cigarette. Okay, you can pour it in, you can use a pod, you can pour it in again, you can use a pod. And so they're really going back and forth between kind of doing this circle of trying to get away out of these tobacco policies that are being put in place. It's the same exact product, but just redesigned in a new and sleeker design. All right, so of course we have to, since we're sponsored by the school, we have to talk about biology and how nicotine impacts our brain. So we have natural nicotine receptors in our brain that are activated whenever we inhale nicotine, any way that we're doing that, whether it's through a regular cigarette or through an e-cigarette. And it only takes nicotine 7 seconds to go from being inhaled through your mouth to hitting your brain. And when these receptors in our brain have nicotine on them, they're able to create dopamine, which is our pleasure neurotransmitter. And this really plays into positive reinforcement. Our brain realizes that we have something going on that's creating dopamine, which is making us happy. And so our brain naturally craves that and wants us to do whatever is giving us that really good euphoric feeling over and over again. So it really kind of reinforces that idea of, okay, if I use this product, then my brain's going to be happy. And when all of these receptors have nicotine on them, then we start making more of them in our brain. And this plays into kind of those cravings, because if you have more receptors, you're going to need more nicotine to make you feel good and to have that same euphoric effect. And when this happens, our brain completely rewires itself. And as I mentioned, we start needing more and more nicotine to get that same effect. And once our brain rewires itself, it allows for us to become dependent on other substances, such as alcohol, later on if we start using those products. And here, this is a scan of a brain. And if you notice, this is a non-smoker up here at the top, and it looks completely different from the smoker's brain scan. And what you're looking at is actually a picture of enzymes that break down dopamine. And the smoker has less of that enzyme going on in its brain, working in its brain. And so this leads to that euphoric feeling. They are not having what's in their brain breaking down that dopamine, so they have a much longer euphoric feeling than, say, a non-smoker. And so this plays into that drive to want to continue to have dopamine. And the major takeaway is that, as you notice, our brain is completely changed by nicotine use. All right, so I'm going to take a moment to see if we have any questions in the chat before we continue on.
Hi, Erica. We only have one question so far, and really it's about plans for the Marvin Ridge High School leadership to help prevent the heavy use of in bathrooms and frequently used vaping. I guess my response to this is, you know, while this question was specifically about Marvin Ridge, that this is an issue that our high school administrators are very aware of, very keenly aware of, and work very diligently to try to stop vaping and vape hangouts and things like this. I think, you know, the part of your presentation that really hits home with this particular question is really, you know, some of those hidden vape pens and the different devices and how difficult it is to really see those and determine that. And so, you know, that makes it very challenging for administrators. But I would say, you know, if you have any specific information for your high school principals, please don't hesitate to reach out directly to them. You know, they are definitely working hard on this issue. It's an ongoing issue. And so, you know, if you have information or you have questions specific to your school, please feel free to reach out to your school-based administrator.
Okay.
And as of right now, that is the only question.
Okay, thank you. So now we're going to get into e-liquid and what is in some of this. And so one statement that we hear a lot of time is that e-liquid is just water, and that is simply not true. And so the next couple of slides we'll go through and we'll kind of determine what is in this e-liquid. So e-liquid is placed inside of the vape or in a pod, and it is heated and it turns into an aerosol that can be inhaled. And one of the most dangerous things that is in e-liquid is, of course, nicotine. And there has not been in the past previous years really strong regulations on how much nicotine is in each pod. And so they're able to put various amounts. And the strengths can range from anywhere from 42 to 56 milligrams. And as we'll see later on, this number is very small compared to what we are actually seeing in some of the newer products. And you have to compare this to 20 milligrams of nicotine in a combustible cigarette. And so a single Juul pod can have as much nicotine as 40 combustible cigarettes. That is 2 packs. And you have students that are using several pods in one day. And so the problem with this is that we are seeing children that are they are basically smoking several packs a day, and they may not even realize it. And so with them not regulating how much nicotine is in each product, it's really hard for students to determine how much they're actually using or how much nicotine they are consuming. And so, as I mentioned, this means that they are smoking packs of cigarettes or the equivalent to packs of cigarettes and have absolutely no clue. And the size of a pod, it's really, really small. And so it's kind of misleading because you think, well, there cannot be much of anything in this, but we now know that that's not true.
It's nicotine concentrate.
Nicotine concentrate, exactly. And so I really like this graphic. This was published by Stanford University, and it breaks down and shows you how much nicotine is in each one of these pods. So on the left-hand side, you have a regular pack of cigarettes that has been regulated for many, many years now. They know 20 milligrams of nicotine is in that pack. But if you look at Juul, as I mentioned, one pod has around 41.3 milligrams of nicotine, which is the same as 41 cigarettes, combustible cigarettes. And then we have Puff Bar, which, keep in mind, is the most current popular vape. And it has 50 milligrams of nicotine in one pod. And that's 50 cigarettes right there. But the one that really gets me and is, I think, the most concerning, and we'll talk about why, is this one on the right. If you are using one pod from this device, you are essentially going through 90 cigarettes. And I mean, that's 4.5 packs of combustible cigarette equivalent in nicotine. And so this is very alarming that they're able to fit that much nicotine in such a small pack of e-liquid. So this is just some of the chemicals that they know are in e-liquids. And if you look, the ones that are in red are now listed on the FDA known harmful and potentially harmful substances. And just to point out a few, we have formaldehyde, lead, aluminum, iron, nickel, and arsenic. Yeah, so when they're using these products, they are literally putting arsenic in their bodies. And it's very alarming once you realize what is going into all of these products. And you have to realize that these that are in black, these chemicals that are listed in black, they might be considered safe, but they are being heated at such extreme degrees to turn from a liquid to a vapor that we have no idea if they're combining, if they're making a third chemical that we don't know about, if their vapor state is even more dangerous than their liquid. We have no clue. And they are doing research into all of this, but it's concerning because it is an unknown. And as they mentioned before, some of these e-liquids can have concentrated THC, or the active ingredient in cannabis. And when they're using these THC-based e-liquids, it is actually called dabbing. That is DABBING. And so you might hear your child saying, "Oh, I'm dabbing," and we think of, Cam Newton's famous move. That's what immediately comes to mind, but they could be talking about something way more dangerous than a touchdown celebration. And so this is just something that we need to be aware of if we're hearing our students using this word, just kind of, recognizing what it actually is. And according to the DEA, THC in vape form is 4 times more potent than any other form of cannabis that you can get. All right, so earlier I talked about these new products coming out, and they're using something called nicotine salts. And this is a new product that is currently taking over the e-cigarette market. And these salts are lab-made products, nicotine products that are going into our e-liquids. And companies are trying to say that they're not tobacco products because they do not come directly from a tobacco leaf or a tobacco plant. But keep in mind, they are doing the exact same thing as a plant-based product, but it's in much stronger strengths. And the problem with nicotine salt is that it can contain more nicotine compared to products such as Juul and other older products that we're seeing. And of course, that leads to a much higher level of nicotine that's being inhaled. As you can see, there was a study done that said that these salts have twice the nicotine concentration. And these salts are much easier to inhale. And so that means that it's not irritating our throat and our lungs as it's being inhaled. And of course, that was one of the things that really stopped people from using combustible cigarettes. They had that burning sensation. You don't like that, your lungs kind of protest. But when it's easier to inhale, then that means starting vaping or continuing to vape is much easier. And it makes it more enjoyable and seem less harmful, because if you don't have any kind of immediate reaction to what you're doing, well, it must not be harmful. And flavors are also much stronger when you are using these nicotine salts. And this is, of course, one of the big things that draw teens into using vapes to begin with. And these concentrations can be as much as 4 times higher than other products. And combined, this makes nicotine salts more addictive, and they can enter the brain much faster than anything that we've ever seen before. All right, so what do I mean when I say e-cigarette aerosol? Well, this is kind of that smoke cloud that we see when people are exhaling. And pretty much just like with regular combustible cigarettes, this is kind of a secondhand smoke in a sense. And once again, a lot of people think that it is just vapor, but in reality, there are over 80 chemicals in this aerosol that's being released. And as people that are around vapors, we're breathing those 80 chemicals in. And these chemicals include common herbicides, heavy metals such as nickel, tin, and lead, and also some cancer-causing chemicals such as aldehyde. So this is clearly something that we do not want to put into our bodies, but think about the people that are inhaling that are keeping that product in their lungs. So I do want to pause again one more time to see if we have any more questions before continuing.
We do not have any new questions yet. You can keep going.
Perfect. All right. So there are 4 really big drivers of this epidemic that we're really going to hit on, but there are many, many more that we could talk about. But for time's sakes, we're really going to only hit on what I believe is 4 of the most important. So the very first one is, of course, that appeal of flavors to youth. As I said, 85% of youth use a flavored product. And so this is clearly a very big appeal to our youth. Many of these flavors resemble food products. So on here, there's one that looks like Ready Whip. There's some that look like Lifesaver gummies. There's juice flavored ones. There's Lucky Charms. And
I see Sour Patch Kids on there.
Yes.
Picture on the left. That's
yes.
what kids like, yeah.
And these are all products that we are very used to. We think is not being harmful. Okay, yes, they have a bunch of sugar and additives in them themselves, but that's for a completely different presentation. But they're safe to consume as long as we have, you know, the right diet in other places. But when they're doing that, they're linking kind of that childhood memory of, oh, I love Lucky Charms. Oh, this is good for me. This is safe. This is okay. And it's really deceiving these youth into thinking that these products are safe. And as you can see, a lot of these boxes and these e-liquids are very eye-catching. They're bright, they're colorful, they have really weird designs, they have pictures, and they have little cartoons that really appeal to youth and younger kids. And like I said, this naturally draws your eye to those products. And it also plays on kind of that childhood instinct of wanting to have candy and sweets and all of these products that look good. So for our next driver, we have to talk about how combustible cigarettes, when we think of that and people that used to smoke that, we think of the rebels, we think of the loners, the people riding off into the sunset on their motorcycles. But once around 2016 hit, and we really saw that spike in e-cigarette youth among vapes, or among youth, what we noticed is that these companies were really targeting these areas that youth were commonly going to. They were going to college-sponsored events. They were going to these festivals where a lot of younger kids were at, and they were promoting their product, and they were saying they're safe, they're safer than smoking, they're nothing but water. And so this really changed from being more loners and rebels using tobacco products to now we're seeing college-driven students and athletic students turning to these products, just like the soccer player down here in the picture. So they really were good at their job of hitting that target population that they wanted. And of course, the ever-changing products that they have, they are designed to hit that target population. They appeal to the youth of that moment. They really drive on, we're sleek, we're cool, we're trendy, and they are trying to stay ahead of kind of the trend to stay relevant and to stay, like I said, trendy. And they're also trying to stay ahead of some of these regulations that are really coming into place, as they're saying, well, you can't do this. The tobacco and vape companies are saying, well, that's perfectly fine because our new product has nothing like that. This is a pod-based system, so of course pouring an e-liquid is something that we would never support. And we saw a lot of this. Unfortunately, our policy is always a little behind what is currently on trend, because they are so good at going ahead and saying, okay, they're catching on to this, so we need to completely redesign how we're doing this, how we're going to promote this, and really staying ahead and staying with those teens and keeping up with trends. And it's also a way to make it a lot harder for parents to know what to look for and to prevent their youth from vaping. That's something that we have to think about. They are trying to now make it easier for you to hide these vapes as a youth. And so, you know, we have to think about all of these things as we look at what is really causing our youth to vape. And I think all of this plays into our very next driver, which is, excuse me, there we go, concealability. As I said, these companies are very, very creative when it comes to how to hide vapes, making vapes look like they are absolutely nothing more than a USB. I know that was something that a lot of parents were surprised at when Juul first came out. I heard parents going, oh my gosh, it looks exactly like a USB. And that was done on purpose. And so as these products continue to change, vape companies really focus on making it much easier for students to hide their products. And as I mentioned, they made them look like everyday products. And some of the pictures down below are examples of what they've done. So as you can see, this is on the right hand side, this is a hoodie where the drawstring is a vape. They have also created inhalers that you can pull the pieces out and you can vape using that. And so when you take it to class, the teacher is going to say, well, what are you doing? Oh, I'm using my inhaler. And it's very easy to pass it off as nothing more than just that. And they also started giving instructions to youth on how best to hide your vapes. So these are some of the examples that I found when I was doing some research on some of the ways that students were able to hide their vapes. And I think this is a really big part of what parents need to know, because they are everyday common products. As you can see, we have Sharpies that people have pulled the piece where the ink is at, and a vape fits perfectly down in there. We have vapes that look like pens, as I showed you earlier in the picture. The one that is down here at the bottom, this is actually marketed as a pen with a vape portion. And so you can write with this pen. You can take it to class, you can write it, and then at the very end you can pull part of it off and use the vape. There are also scrunchies that you can buy. I think you can get these at Claire's, and it has a zipper in it to where you can hide your vape. That is very easy to conceal. For the guys, there are hats that has zippers on the side of it. I've also heard stories of teenagers that were taking vapes to school. They would say, okay, today I'm bringing it, and they would take it and they would hide it in a specific location, and multiple students would come and use that vape. They would send it out in a group chat, okay, it's here today. And so they were able to hide it on school premises, and a lot of people had access to it, but it was never really on their person. You can buy vape. You can buy vape vitamins now. So it kind of normalizes that idea of, oh, I use it for my melatonin. And all of these examples I got just by typing in hiding vapes. So that is how easy it is to hide or to get that information. And you can also buy a concealing kit right online and have it shipped right to your house, and parents would never know. So some of the methods that companies used to target the teens was, of course, their flavors. They made it seem cool. They made it seem trendy and safe. But they also did advertising in places where teens were often found. And I think the most disturbing part about this is that they put them low so that even 4 and 5-year-olds, as they're walking into the store, it's right at eye level, and they're used to seeing these, and they think that it's safe because, okay, this product has been around for 10 years now, it must be safe. And they were also using social media. This was sites that a lot of parents are not on, so it's very easy to put your ad in there and it pops up, and you can also select the age range that you want. And so if it's somebody that they know is over 25, this ad will never pop up on their Instagram or their Facebook. And so that was definitely a big problem because because parents were not seeing these ads that were popping up on their teen social media. And this was actually something that was produced by a e-cigarette company. And this is just one of the examples of how they were trying to deceive people. If you look at it, it's trying to show vapes as a much safer alternative. Okay, there are 600 ingredients in cigarettes, but there's only 4 in vapes. And notice how they use like tombstones on the smoke or on the cigarette side, but then they use a smiley face on the vaping side. And this just goes to show that they were really trying to deceive people and saying that this was a much safer alternative. But we have to remember that safer does not always mean safe. It is still harmful. Yes, it might be safer than combustible cigarettes, but it is still harmful to our bodies. What is safer? So some of the symptoms that you might see if your child is vaping is some of these chest symptoms. They're gonna have a cough, they're gonna have chest pains and shortness of breath. They're gonna have nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, increased heart rate, fevers and/or chills, and fatigue. And all of this starts usually within several days to several weeks of them starting to vape and use these products. And if you notice, these are the exact same symptoms that somebody that uses regular combustible cigarettes will have. And vaping also led to an increased chance of catching COVID-19 because they have a weakened immune system and they have damage already to their lungs. So it made it a lot easier for COVID to kind of come in and find a good safe home for it to take root and make this person sick. In 2019, we had something called e-cigarette and vaping use associated lung injury, or EVALI. And this was a set of symptoms that caused serious lung illness. And what they found was that vitamin E acetate, which is an additive to these e-liquids, was getting into people's lungs. And when they were doing CAT scans, they were finding that there were hazy spots in their lungs, which means that there was some lung damage. So clearly this is something that was very concerning. And it would be interesting to see, since they had to stop due to COVID, what this looks like now once we're able to step away from that. And so some signs that your teen might be vaping would be some behavior change. They're going to be irritable. They're going to have anxiety and mood control or mood changes. They're going to have a hard time concentrating and performing simple tasks. They might have changes in their diets. They're going to get fatigued really quickly. I heard a story of a baseball team that they were all using vapes and suddenly they were not able to run a complete lap around the field. So this is clearly something that is affecting you physically. They're also going to have mouth sores and dry mouth, and sometimes they'll have unexplained nosebleeds. And they might start burning candles or incense, using perfume or cologne to try to cover up that sweet smell of the products that they're using. So when you want to start talking to your children about vaping, we have some tips that you can use. So before you have your talk, get to know your facts and educate yourself. This is a really wonderful opportunity to do that, but don't let this be the last time that you are educated, because as I mentioned, products continue to change. There's new information out there. We're learning something new every day. And your child might have questions, and so it's important to make sure that we understand and we know what's going on so that we can answer those questions. Put yourself in your child's shoes. Talk about peer pressure, because they're going to experience it. Think about the influences that they might be experiencing from their friends, the environment that they're in, all of these things that I was talking about, like even the gas station. These are things that might influence your child. Be open and calm during the conversation. We know that teens can easily shut down parents and just block you out. So just trying to keep that conversation going and being prepared. Start preparing yourself to hear that your child might be vaping. Find the right time and space. This can be kind of difficult, but maybe you could start by, when you're at the gas station, asking them a question. Oh, what do you think about vapes? What do you do any of your friends vape? Is this something that you're concerned about? Because this won't put them on the defensive, and this will open up an opportunity for them to kind of speak and let them guide that conversation. And take time to practice, because this is a hard conversation to have, and you're going to want to be prepared. But the most important thing that you can do before you even start talking to them is lead by example. If you smoke, if you use vapes yourself, start thinking about a quit journey. Start thinking about your own quit journey, because this will start and influence your teen when they see that, to know, okay, this is something that I shouldn't be doing and that I should start thinking about making a change. And so as you're talking to them, understand that your child is independent. I know sometimes that is hard, but as we know, kids, they're going to make their own decisions anyway, but we can be there to help guide them and show them the support that they might need. And we have to understand that they may not be at a place where they want to talk about it, but just letting them know that we're a resource for them is very important, and that they can come to us. Prepare yourself, again, as I said, to hear that they are vaping, that they are using these products, and be ready with resources and support. And as I mentioned, if you are starting a quit journey yourself, turn this into a family effort. Say, okay, this is a problem that both of us have. We can face it together, and we can really become a support system for each other. And after your talk, make sure that they understand that this is not the only time that we have to talk about this. This is an ongoing conversation. This is something you might have questions about later on, and I will be here. Give them stress management tools that they can use when they either feel like they need to continue vaping or want to continue vaping, or keeping them from turning to vapes. Talk about that peer pressure and give them the refusal skills that they need to make sure that when it happens, they're able to stand their own ground and make the best decision. And follow up, because their status might be different tomorrow. From tonight to tomorrow, they might have tried e-cigarettes, or they might have had time to think about wanting to quit. And continue to learn, because these new products are coming out every day. Information that I have today might be irrelevant tomorrow, because something brand new might hit the market overnight. And so it's important to continue to stay up to date and to know as much as possible. So nationally, they have decided to put warning labels on these e-cigarette products, which was a huge step. And this started in 2018, and it really was that shift that we needed to make people more aware that these products are dangerous, they have nicotine, and they are not any different than combustible cigarettes. This flavor ban that I alluded to earlier on, this was put in place in early 2020, and it aimed to regulate the products that were on the market. And so what they said was any product that was currently on the market had to go through the FDA to get approval to continue selling. And this was just a way to try to pull some of these flavors, excuse me, that are appealing to youth. But there was loopholes that, excuse me, there were loopholes that these companies were able to go through. And as I mentioned, they were able to say, well, we're not a tobacco product because we use the synthetic nicotine. And they were able to find ways out of having to regulate. But just last month, the FDA got approval to start regulating these synthetic nicotine products. And so this is a huge, huge win for us because now any product that is released, whether it is a tobacco plant-based product or a synthetic nicotine product, will have to be approved by the FDA. In North Carolina, we continue to hear about Attorney General Josh Stein and his fight against Juul. And in in June 2021, North Carolina won their settlement against Juul. And what they were trying to say was that Juul had purposely designed, marketed, and sold e-cigarettes that specifically appealed to youth. And so this money that we will hopefully be seeing in the next few years will really go towards prevention, education, and some treatment methods for youth here in North Carolina. And now we have a lawsuit against the founders of Juul because it has been determined, or we believe there's enough evidence to say that they were personally involved and knew that their company were using these deceiving practices. So unfortunately, we cannot completely not discuss some of these other products, such as combustible cigarettes. As you can see, here are listed some of the other combustible cigarette products that we have, such as little cigars, cigarillos that are tipped, and regular cigarillos, and also cigars as well. And it's estimated that 1,900 students across the nation have tried smoking for the very first time every day. So this continues to be a problem, even though it seems not as big compared to the 8,000 that are using e-cigarette products for the first time. It's still too high of a number for us to feel comfortable. And people that use these products are 4 to 10 times more likely to die from oral, esophageal, or laryngeal cancer. So this is still a problem that we're having to address. And of course, we have smokeless tobacco as well. And these products are not burned, but are instead either sucked or chewed. And you can either inhale these through the nose or you can put them in your mouth. And the unfortunate thing is that a lot of these products are spitless tobacco, and that means that you can swallow these products. And so it was very easy during COVID for people that were wearing masks to have these devices or have these products and hide them. And then instead of having to spit them out like we're used to, they were able to just swallow that, and you would never know that they had them in their mouths. And these products are very, very small. Some can be as small as a Tic Tac. And 4.1% of high school students and 2.2% of middle school students still continue to use this product. And you are 50 times more likely to develop oral cancer if you use these products than the normal population. So I also have some free resources for you that we're going to go through very quickly. Our greatest resource here in North Carolina is the Quitline NC. They are just a fabulous resource for us here. And they are available 24/7, and they have on-call quit coaches that are there to help you at any time that you decide to start your quit journey. And you can reach them by calling 1-800-QUIT-NOW or texting READY to 200-400. And in just a moment, we'll talk about their texting base program that they have specifically for teens. But the Quitline provides nicotine replacement therapy for anyone that is over 18. So this is your patches, your gum, your lozenges that are used to help you quit and kind of soothe those cravings and help you make that transition. And of course, there are free resources and quit tips on their website. So Live Vape Free is the teen texting based program that they have. And you can reach them by texting Vape Free NC to 873373. And they send teens videos, quizzes, podcasts, any kind of resource that they can to encourage them as they start transitioning to becoming tobacco free. They also have coaches 24/7, and all the kids have to do is text coach to that same number, and they are immediately put in contact with the quit coach that is right there giving them encouraging messages. There's also resources for parents on their website that help them learn how to discuss and talk about these products and this issue with their teens. And they also have access to the quit coaches as well anytime. So Live Vape Free, you can also text keywords like boost, and it'll send automatic messages like you're struggling with the bad mood and need a little help understanding what's bringing you down and how to feel better. And so this is really nice for these teens because it gives them that little pick-me-up, that little bit of encouragement that they need. And it's a 6-week long program where they text you every day and they're in constant contact, but they also do a follow-up at 1 month, 3 months, and 6 months. And you can enroll up to 14 days before your quit date. So this is their website, and this is where parents would go, and they have a whole resource section for parents, and then they also have access to those quit coaches so that you're able to talk with them at any time. This is Quitting is out of the Truth Initiative, and it is also a text-based service because they know that this is what teens like. And you can reach them by texting Ditch Vape to 88709. And this is for anyone that is age 13 to 24. And it has tailored messaging to whatever product that your youth is using. And the really cool part about it is that they used youth that were previous vapors to come up with this messaging. They said, this is what worked for me, this is what you need to put out. And so people really felt that they were not alone and that there was a way out of their quote addiction by reading these messages. And it was very encouraging to realize that someone their own age had gone through this and had come out the other side. There's also resources for parents at this resource as well. And it's specific for parents of vapors. And then Aspire is a self-paced tobacco prevention program that they have, and it gives you information from former smokers, healthcare professionals, students, and cancer survivors. And it really just is a nice kind of overview of tobacco products, the effects that it might have on relationships, refusal methods, and it only takes about 3 hours to complete. And this is provided in both English and Spanish. There's another resource out of smokefree.gov, and this resource will actually help you come up with a quit plan so that you know what is going to kind of happen every day. And they have an app that youth can download, and again, you can text specific keywords to them, and they will send those tailored messages. And then PAVE is a wonderful resource for parents. This is for people that want to become active in taking down the tobacco company. They want to be a part of that change in legislation and push to make our youth safer. And they also have a program where they do education for parents and anyone that might work with youth. And that just helps them keep informed and moving towards creating a much healthier youth. All right, so we are going to open the floor now to any other questions that we might have out of the chat box.
We actually don't have any questions at this time.
Sounds like you got all their questions answered. Well, thank you, Erica, for joining us tonight. I really feel like you really hit the nail on the head with a lot of the information here. I don't think kids realize what they're doing when they're vaping. I don't think they realize how much nicotine they're putting in their bodies when they're doing the vaping. I don't think they realize the long-term ramifications of what they're doing. They're middle school, high school kids, they're teens, they're just doing what they think is cool. And unfortunately, it's a reality we have to deal with. And I'm just glad that we have people like you who can help educate us on what's out there, what are the dangers, but then what are all these resources we have available that parents and families have to help their kids face these issues, if it happens to be something they have to deal with. So thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
All right. I hope you all have a good night.